Have you ever walked past a school at midnight? Or a hospital? Or a grand old theater? The lights are off. The doors are locked. You think they're empty? But they're not. Someone is always there. The janitors, the custodians, the keepers of the quiet halls. They come alive when the world goes to sleep, armed with mops and brooms. They move through cavernous, silent spaces that hum with the day's leftover energy. They know the building's secrets. They hear the pipes groan and the foundations settle, but sometimes they hear other things that don't have an explanation. Silent witnesses to the world after dark. They see what no one else sees. Shadows that play tricks on your eyes. Doors that creak open on their own. Whispers that travel down empty corridors when there's no wind. Most of the time, it's just the building settling, just an old radiator kicking on. But every now and then it's something more. Something that makes the hair on their arms stand up. Something that makes them question if they are truly alone in the vast, echoing darkness. Are you ready to hear what they've seen? Our first story comes from a man named Arthur. A quiet man who had been the night custodian at an old elementary school for over 20 years. The school was built in the 1930s, a brick fortress of learning with tall windows, floors that groaned with the weight of generations. Arthur loved the quiet, the solitude. He knew every inch of that building. He knew which floorboards creaked, which doors whistled when a draft snuck through. But one winter night, he discovered the school had a secret it had never shared with him before. A secret that would make him dread the silence he once cherished. He was on the second floor, buffing the linoleum in the long main hallway. The only sound was the low hum of his machine, its single headlight cutting a bright circle on the polished floor. The rest of the corridor stretched into an inky blackness, punctuated only by the faint moonlight filtering through the tall windows. He worked his way down the hall, lost in the repetitive motion, the familiar drone of the buffer. He was approaching the last classroom, Mrs. Gable's third grade room. He switched off the machine, and the sudden, profound silence washed over him. It was then that he heard it, a soft, rhythmic tapping. Arthur froze, listening. Tap, tap, tap. It was coming from inside the classroom. He frowned. He had locked that room himself not an hour ago. All the children and the teachers had been gone for hours. He thought maybe a tree branch was hitting the window, but the sound was too precise, too deliberate. It sounded like someone tapping a pencil on a desk, slowly. Cautiously, he walked toward the door. The small, wired glass window in the door was dark. He peered through, his breath fogging the cold glass. The room was a sea of shadows, the moonlight barely illuminating the rows of small desks and chairs. The tapping stopped. The silence that rushed back in felt heavy, watchful. Arthur's heart was pounding. He told himself it was nothing, just his imagination playing tricks on him in the deep of the night. He reached for his keys, his hand trembling slightly as he found the one for this room. He needed to check. He had to be sure. As his fingers closed around the cold metal key, he looked back through the window one last time. And that's when he saw it. A small, dark shape, no bigger than a child, darted from behind the teacher's desk and vanished into the deepest shadows at the back of the room. A cold dread washed over Arthur, colder than the winter air outside. It wasn't a trick of the light. It wasn't a shadow from a passing car. It moved. It had form. He snatched his hand back from the door as if the lock had burned him. His mind raced, trying to find a logical explanation. A stray animal? A prankster? But he had walked the entire perimeter. Every door and window was sealed tight. No one could have gotten in, and no animal he knew moved like that. It was too quick, too silent, too much like a fleeting thought made solid for just a moment in the dark. He stood there for what felt like an eternity, his back pressed against the opposite wall of the hallway, his eyes locked on the classroom door. He didn't dare move. He just listened. The silence was absolute now. The tapping was gone. The shadow was gone. But the feeling of being watched was stronger than ever. It radiated from the door, a palpable pressure in the air. He felt like a mouse being watched by an owl, frozen in place, knowing that any movement could bring disaster. He thought about his cart, the buffer, the rest of the floor he had to clean. None of it mattered anymore. Slowly, painstakingly, he began to back away down the hallway. He didn't turn his back on the door, not for a second. His boots made soft, shuffling sounds on the floor he had just polished, the only noise in the vast, silent school. With every step he took, he expected the door to fly open. He expected to hear that tapping sound again, only louder this time, more insistent. He expected to see that small, dark shape fill the small window in the door, looking out at him. but nothing happened. The door remained closed. The hallway remained empty and dark behind him. He finally reached the stairwell at the other end of the hall. He fumbled for the light switch, his hands shaking so badly it took him 3 tries to flip it on. The stairwell flooded with harsh yellow light, chasing the shadows away. Only then did he turn and run. He didn't stop until he was in his small office in the basement, the door locked, the lights on. He never finished buffing the 2nd floor that night. He told his supervisor he felt ill and went home early. He never told anyone what he really saw. Who would have believed the story of the shadow child in Mrs. Gable's room? Arthur worked at that school for 2 more years before retiring, but he was never the same. He never again worked on the 2nd floor alone after midnight. He would always save that section for the earliest hours of his shift, when the sun was just beginning to hint at its return. He would prop open the stairwell doors, letting the light from the other floors spill into that long, dark hallway. He avoided looking through the window of Mrs. Gable's classroom. He did his work quickly, efficiently, his ears always straining for the slightest sound, the soft tap-tap-tapping that haunted his quietest moments. He never saw the shadow again, but he felt it. This story serves as a chilling reminder. The places our children occupy during the day, places filled with laughter, light, learning, when these buildings fall silent at night, those echoes can sometimes play back. They can take on a life of their own in the deep, quiet dark. It warns us that even the most innocent of places can harbor secrets. Being alone in a large, empty building is a gamble. You are betting that the creaks and groans are just the building settling, and not something else entirely, waiting in the shadows for an audience. Sometimes the most terrifying things are not monsters with claws and fangs. They are the things that are almost familiar. A shape that is almost a child. A sound that is almost a pencil tapping. It's the almost that gets under your skin. It's the uncertainty that lingers long after the encounter is over. Arthur learned a hard lesson that night on the 2nd floor. He learned that some doors are better left locked. He learned that some mysteries are better left unsolved. He learned that when you are the only living soul for miles, you are never, ever, truly alone. So the next time you see a school standing dark and silent against the night sky, think of Arthur. Think of the janitors who walk its empty halls. They are the guardians of these spaces, the keepers of the quiet. But what are they guarding against? Or perhaps, what are they guarding us from? What other lessons are being taught in those empty classrooms after the final bell has rung and the moon has risen high? The silence of an old building at night is a heavy blanket, and you never know what might be stirring underneath. Hospitals are places of transition. Birth, death, sickness, healing. They're just, saturated with the most powerful human emotions: fear, hope, grief, relief. Maria, a janitor on the night shift at a sprawling city hospital, knew this well. She had worked there for a decade, cleaning the aftermath of these intense moments. The beeps of machines, the quiet sobbing from a visitor's lounge, the urgent overhead pages. These were the normal sounds of a hospital at night. But the sounds she heard one evening in the old, partially closed-off wing were anything but normal. And they came with a cold that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. The hospital was undergoing renovations. The entire 3rd floor of the historic East Wing had been shut down for months. The power was off. The rooms were empty. The doors were locked. A nightly check of the area. A quick walkthrough with a flashlight. Ensure there were no leaks. Ensure there were no vandals. She hated it. The air in that wing was stagnant and heavy. The silence was different from the rest of the hospital. It was a dead silence, thick and oppressive. It felt like walking through a tomb, the flashlight beam her only companion in the suffocating dark. On this particular night, as she pushed open the heavy fire door to the wing, an unusual chill hit her. It was a damp, biting cold that seemed to seep right into her bones. She pulled her sweater tighter and stepped into the long, dark corridor. Her flashlight cut a path through the gloom, revealing empty nurses' stations, doorways that gaped like open mouths. As she walked, she heard a faint, rhythmic squeaking sound. Squeak, squeak, squeak. It sounded like the wheel of a gurney or a wheelchair, one that needed oiling. But that was impossible. The wing was empty. The sound seemed to be coming from the far end of the hall, near room 313. As she got closer, the squeaking stopped. Maria stood perfectly still, her light pointed down the corridor. The silence was absolute once more, but the cold was even more intense here. Goosebumps erupted on her arms. Her breath plumed in the flashlight beam. She told herself it was just a rat, or the wind. But there was no wind in this sealed-off wing. She took a hesitant step forward, and the sound began again, only this time it was accompanied by something else. A faint, weak whisper, like the dry rustle of leaves. Maria's blood ran cold. The whisper was indistinct, but it sounded like a voice. A frail, tired voice. It was coming from inside room 313. She slowly approached the door, her heart hammering against her ribs. The small rectangular window on the door was black. She raised her flashlight, the beam shaking, and peered inside. The room was completely bare. There was no bed, no furniture, nothing but dust and shadows. And yet, the whispering continued, seeming to come from the very center of the empty room. It sounded like someone trying to say a word over and over, but failing. Suddenly, the squeaking started again, loud and frantic, right from the other side of the door. Maria jumped back with a cry, dropping her flashlight. It clattered to the floor, the beam spinning wildly across the ceiling before settling on the door of room 313. In that fractured, dancing light, she saw it. For a split second, the silhouette of a person in a wheelchair was visible through the window. It was just a dark shape, hunched over, but it was unmistakably there. Then just as quickly, it was gone. The whispering stopped. The squeaking stopped. The silence that slammed back into place was terrifying. Shaking uncontrollably, Maria scrambled for her flashlight. She scooped it up and pointed it at the window, her hand trembling so much the beam jittered and danced. The window was empty. The room beyond was empty. But she knew what she had seen. It was no trick of the light. She backed away from the door, her eyes wide with terror, not daring to turn away. She felt an icy draft swirl around her feet, and then she felt something else, a cold, damp pressure on her hand, as if someone with a weak and freezing grip had just tried to take her hand. She screamed. It was not a loud scream, but a choked, breathless sound of pure horror. She ripped her hand away from the invisible touch and bolted. She ran blindly down the dark corridor, not caring if she tripped, not caring about anything except putting distance between herself and room 313. She burst through the fire doors back into the brightly lit, active part of the hospital, gasping for breath, her heart feeling like it would explode. A nurse at the main desk looked up, startled. "Maria, are you okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." Maria couldn't answer. She could only nod, her eyes still wide with terror. Maria later learned from one of the older nurses about the history of the East Wing. Room 313 had a story. Decades ago, it was where a very lonely elderly patient had spent his final days. He had lost the use of his legs and was confined to a wheelchair. His only family was gone, and he had no visitors. His nurses said he was always cold, constantly asking for more blankets. He passed away one night, alone in that room, found in the morning by a janitor. They said he died while trying to wheel himself to the door, perhaps to call for help, or perhaps just looking for some human contact. This story is a stark warning about places that are soaked in profound human emotion. Hospitals, more than most buildings, are reservoirs of pain, fear, loneliness. These powerful feelings don't always dissipate when a life ends. They can linger. They can leave an imprint, an emotional stain on a room, a hallway, a wheelchair. They can manifest in the deep of the night, replaying a final, desperate moment for anyone unfortunate enough to be there to witness it. It reminds us that the veil between worlds can be especially thin in places of such intense suffering. Maria never went back into the East Wing. She asked to be reassigned and eventually took a job at a different facility altogether. But she never forgot the biting cold, the sound of that squeaking wheel, or the phantom touch on her hand. She understood that some spirits are not malicious or evil. They are simply lost, lonely, and cold, forever reaching out for a warmth they can no longer feel. Our final story takes place in a location built for drama and illusion, a grand historic theater. These places have their own superstitions, the most famous being the ghost light, a single bare bulb left burning on a stand in the center of the stage when the theater is empty. Some say it's for safety, to prevent people from falling into the orchestra pit in the dark. But the old-timers, the true theater folk, will tell you it's for the ghosts. It's to give the spirits who haunt the theater enough light to perform their own shows, so they don't get angry and curse the living's productions. Leo, a young janitor, thought it was all just a silly superstition. He was about to find out how wrong he was. Leo was working his way through the cavernous, empty auditorium, cleaning up the popcorn and discarded programs from the evening show. The only light came from his own work lights and the lonely ghost light, which cast long, distorted shadows across the thousands of empty velvet seats. The silence was immense. A theater that holds thousands of people feels unnervingly vast when you are the only one in it. Every tiny sound, the rustle of a trash bag, the squeak of his shoes, echoed dramatically in the stillness. It was past 2 a.m., and he was starting to feel the heavy weight of the silence and the solitude. He had just finished the main seating area and was heading towards the stage to clean it. As he approached, he noticed something odd. A faint melody seemed to be drifting from the stage. It was a simple, sad piano tune, barely audible. He stopped, listening intently. It was definitely music. He thought maybe a radio had been left on in the orchestra pit. He walked to the edge of the stage and peered down. It was pitch black. No lights, no sound coming from below. The music was coming from the stage itself, seemingly from the old upright piano that was kept in the wings for rehearsals. Puzzled, Leo climbed the short steps onto the stage. The moment his feet touched the wooden boards, the music stopped. The silence that rushed in was startling. He stood there for a moment, his eyes adjusting to the dim glow of the ghost light. The massive, empty auditorium gaped before him like a dark mouth. He felt a sudden, intense wave of stage fright, a feeling of being watched by 1,000 unseen eyes. He shook his head, trying to clear it. It was just the late hour getting to him. He walked over to the piano in the wings. The lid over the keys was closed and covered in a thin layer of dust. Leo stared at the closed piano, his brow furrowed. It was impossible. The music had been so clear. He reached out and ran a finger across the dusty lid, leaving a clean streak. No one had touched this piano tonight. He was about to turn away, to dismiss it as a hallucination brought on by fatigue, when he saw something that made his heart stop. On the dusty stage floor near the piano were footprints. They weren't his. They were smaller, more delicate, like those of a woman in dancing shoes. From the darkest part of the stage wings, stopped at the piano, led to the very center of the stage, stopping right next to the ghost light. He followed the trail of prints, his own heavy bootsteps feeling clumsy and loud. He stood beside the ghost light, looking at where the delicate footprints ended. Empty space. The air grew cold and he heard a sound. A soft, heartbroken sigh beside him. He spun around, alone on the vast stage. The ghost light began to flicker. It pulsed slowly, like a weak heartbeat, strobed across the auditorium. In that flicker, the seats were no longer empty. Hazy, translucent figures filled the house. A full house of silent, watching specters all looking at him. Light back on, empty seats. Pulse off, full, pulse on, empty. He cried out and stumbled, tripping over the cord. The light stand toppled, the bulb shattered. Absolute, terrifying darkness. He was alone with the memory of 1,000 ghosts. Leo's story, a final, chilling curtain call. Places built for performance hold onto their energy. The applause, the music, the drama. It all leaves a residue. A warning, turning off the lights might not end the show, but hand the stage to another cast. So, as you move through quiet buildings after dark, ask yourself, who or what is waiting in the wings for its cue? What performance is about to begin, now that the audience has gone and you are the only one left to watch?